Hello, a very good afternoon to you all. This is Pragya, your host for the masterclass. It's so great to see you all here on a Sunday evening. I'm super thrilled to welcome you all to today's masterclass on intersection of product managers and designers. Feel free to drop a hi or a hello or any comments for the speaker and me in the chat window. In the next 2 hours, we'll discuss and understand the difference between engineering design approach and design engineering approach when it comes to building products and also get to know design thinking framework. Grab a cup of coffee or notepad and let's begin with today's session. So before we start today's insightful session, let me give you a quick intro to the Institute. The Institute of Product Leadership is Asia's first business school providing accredited degree programs and certification courses in product management, product leadership, data science, design, strategy, and leadership. The Institute has partnered with 3 universities in India and the University of Houston in the United States. The Institute was founded in 2012 with a singular mission of creating 10,000 plus product leaders in the country. Ever since, the organization has designed and delivered programs in collaboration with various institutes, universities, and corporates to senior working professionals to help them make career transition into product leadership. The institute has built and developed a community of over 3,000 plus successful alumni leading the product, data, and design team across the world. We are also knowledge partners for 240 plus organizations worldwide. The institute offers new age skills and courses for every step of your career. Every course is built, curated, and designed by industry practitioners. You can find out more about the institute and the programs offered on our website. Please check the chat window for the URL. And also for those who have joined us via LinkedIn, please check the comment section for the URL. Folks, the International Certification in Product Management program is created and curated by industry CXOs focused on learning and career outcomes for aspiring and current product managers with many case studies, simulation, real-life projects, and personalized coaching. So go ahead and scan the QR code to know more about the program. Here's a moment to scan the QR code. Once the speaker presents his insights, we'll open up for questions. Please keep your questions ready. You can post the questions on Zoom in the Q&A section. The session is being streamed live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So viewers on any of these channels, please feel free to post the question in the comments and we'll share it with the speaker. So without further delay, please allow me to welcome our very distinguished and eminent speaker for today's session, Noorul Ameen. Noorul is a certified design thinking professional and web accessibility consultant. He comes with 18 plus years of industry experience in strategizing UX, designing UI, managing design teams, running design OPs, generating revenue for design agencies, and mentoring young designers. He is currently working with Mitratech, an industry leader which provides a proven portfolio of end-to-end software solutions for legal, compliance, and HR professionals. He manages the design function for 2 business units spanning across 7 products. He is also responsible for the team's daily operations, growth, competency, and skill development. Pleased to welcome you, Noorul. Handing over the session to you.
Thank you so much, Pragya. Thanks for the introduction. Let me go ahead and start sharing the screen. Okay. Hope the screen is visible for all.
Yes, it's good.
Okay, so before we even start, welcome everyone to this particular session, and thanks Pragya for the introduction. And today we are going to talk about how product managers and designers go together, right? And it's basically looking at each other's lens and understand how the other person behaves and talks and feels when it comes to product building. Okay. So feel free to stop me any point in time where we have a question, and we will get that answered right there. A little more about me. I have worked across multiple industries, almost pretty much all of the business domains, starting with wealth management and financial being my strongest. Around 8+ years, I have been on the financial side, building stock brokerage products for Bank of New York Mellon. Have worked on cloud storage, cloud data storage, from a secondary storage standpoint, infrastructure automation, so on and so forth, right? And these are the major companies which I have worked with, consulted, and proven value to many. So the agenda for today's discussion is going to be three important steps. The first is to identify what mindset are we moving on with when we are developing products, right? So let's talk about the psychology behind how we develop products and what is the mindset that we apply when we go ahead and put our role in which is on paper in practice, right? And then come out with some certain frameworks to understand them better. So we have a method to the madness, and followed by a case study, which I have gone through in my life from my own experience, which will prove the fact that, hey, this is not just in paper, it is practical, and it is pretty much easy to implement, right? So with that being said, before moving on, let's see if we can have a quick round of introductions. Pragya, can we do that? Can we make folks to talk about them for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure. We can.
So
Yeah, we
basically,
can do that.
this session has to be very much equivocal, where folks have to start giving their pointers about questions. I will also need to understand on from what basis are they asking questions from, right? So a quick introduction will really resonate with us a lot. So how many folks do we have as participants, Pragya?
We have 16 on Zoom and rest are on LinkedIn. So we'll take up questions. So folks, you can ask your questions in the comment section or chat window, or you can raise your hand so we can unmute you.
Okay, so at least folks on this particular agenda, like the Zoom agenda, can we have a quick round of introductions? Feel free to raise your hand and talk about yourself for a minute or two, the role that you play in your current organization, etc., etc. Okay, that's Neha for us. Please go ahead, Neha.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, Neha, please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Neha. I'm living in Pune and I'm working as a product owner, product manager, and I'm working with a company called as Prosiod in Bangalore.
Okay,
Looking forward to this session, a great product enthusiast, I've always been, and
okay,
also expecting to know more about design thinking. That's one of my favorite frameworks.
okay. Perfect. So you're bang on. You actually walk the talk about, okay, your expectation, right? So thanks for
Yeah,
that, Neha, and thanks for volunteering as the first participant. Any
thank
more
you.
people who wanted to talk about themselves and their expectations from this particular class? We'll have a minute or two for them. Okay, that's Avipsa. Please go ahead.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
So my name is Avipsa. I'm a test engineer working from Pune location
Mhm.
in Allstate. And yep, I am very much new to this product management thing, and everything right now is I'm like a newbie here, and I have lots of expectations to learn.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Avipsa. And we can probably have the last person to introduce him or her, and we start with the session next. Can we have the next participant, please? Okay, that's Vaishnavi now. Please go ahead, Vaishnavi. think you're on mute, Vaishnavi.
Hi, this is Vaishnavi. Yeah, I'm from automation QA background, and I want to know product manager profile in terms of how it is close to product owner, or how to develop a product mindset in order to become a product manager. That I want to know.
Cool. Very good. Thank you, Vaishnavi. Thanks for joining the session. And I could fairly see that, I mean, I'm not sure about the rest of the folks, but I could see fairly that we are new to product management. We wanted to understand the nitty-gritties about this particular concept, which is design thinking. And I wish to apply is the major expectation that we see from the crowd, right? Can we all have a yes or a no to that particular question? Like a reaction, please. Okay, Aditya said yes to that. Just a moment, please. Just a moment. I need to open my window back. Okay. Just a second, guys. Let me open that back for you. Okay. Okay. Hope you're able to see the screen now.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, sorry about that delay. I got messed up with the set of tabs that I have on my window. And let's just move on, right? Okay, so we all know how product management used to be, right? When we were building products, we started with business processes. Let it be insurance product, or a Medicaid product, or a healthcare product, or it could be an industrial automation product, right? So first off, we wanted, as product owners and product managers, we basically wanted to understand the process, the business processes, the workflow behind the whole systems, right? And that's fairly okay for us to start understanding, which is basically the core, the crux of what we wanted to establish as a product. Now we wanted to put some layer on top of it in terms of functionality. Okay, certain business processes that behave in a unique fashion, which are connected together in the form of a workflow, needs to be delivered to users, end users, as functions, right? So user can pick a function and go do it. And then a feature came into existence, right? So this is a natural progression from process, feature, functionality, and features. This kind of a approach to the product building exercise, we used to call it as engineering design. And why are we calling it as engineering design? Because there are well-defined parts, right? So all of this have to be assembled together, and you will create a solution out of it. Okay, the well-defined parts here are nothing but the processes. You are assembling them together in the form of a functionality, and you're solutionizing them in the form of a feature. right? Which is fairly easy to understand and how people have experienced over life. But today, what has happened is, when I say today, this is not just something which happened yesteryear, but it is at least 10 to 20, 15 years right now that we are living in the age of something called design engineering, right? And what is design engineering all about? We have to improve our experience to the user from the product's standpoint, so that we have an engagement from the end user for our products. So the product needs to be intuitive, the product needs to be understood, the product needs to be self-explanatory with less user manual, and the engagement to the product should be more peaking high and high, right? This form of thought process is called design engineering, where we develop ideas with a lot of intuition. We go ahead there, so there's going to be a lot of ambiguity behind this. There is nothing which is well defined. A lot of chaos come in when we are doing this, and we try to develop ideas among those chaotic environment with a lot of intuition and our gut feeling, and we productize them, right? So this is design engineering. So it's a play of words from engineering design to design engineering, but now I hope you are able to understand the difference between the two. So as change makers, as potential change makers in an organization, like Vaishnavi, who mentioned she wants to become a product owner, right? And so folks like them who wanted to be change makers inside an organization, right from how they want to start in the product management side, versus how product managers of today want to innovate for the future, right? When we wanted to become change makers, you wanted to basically move away from engineering design and more into design engineering. So it's not a problem with engineering design. Engineering design need to be there. You need to understand the processes. You need to understand the workflow, how things work. But that doesn't stop there. Your end deliverables doesn't stop there. Your thought process has to change. And how would you change it? The drivers which will help you change are basically moving towards product innovation, any market validation that you need to make with respect to your product and your competitors, right? So potential change makers need to have this mindset shift. And now we are essentially talking about how an engineer-like problem-solving method happens versus a designer-like problem-solving happens, right? Here we are literally not talking about the role engineer, the role designer, but it's just about the mindset that they come with when they are trying to solve a problem and create some value to end users. We talk about engineering thinking, and we essentially talked about a linear process. It could be non-linear in certain manner, but most often it is repeatable, linear, and predictable, right? So it's a problem-oriented approach. And we talked about it being mostly linear approach, and we know it has a known set of inputs, right? So we know specifically, hey, we need to apply this now so that we get that tomorrow, and hence the outcome is also predictable. And there is a clean journey which has happened over years, honed over years. A template has been created, and we know this sustains. However, when we are talking about the next model, which is coming from a design engineering or a design thinking model, it has to be on need basis, right? So what does the user essentially needs, right? It doesn't try to solve the problem which says, hey, what can we provide the user? No, it has to be what the user really needs, right? And the process is very difficult to define because it really depends on the need of the user, and the needs change over time, right? So when we are applying a particular process today for a particular user, it may not be the same for, let's say, 10 years from now for the same product audience. And we have a lot of ambiguity in inputs, right? People, when they say certain things, they may mean it differently. That's really how users behave, right? So no user is perfect. We are cognizant about the fact that it is so. And we have a lot of ambiguity when we assume inputs, and we definitely don't understand or know if the outcome is predictable. So it is a journey that the design thinking professional has to go through. While it is always a chaotic, it will also be a bumpy ride during this particular journey. And how can we move from a problem solving approach towards innovating, right? So this matrix will help you understand that particular aspect, what we just talked about. When we are talking about a well-defined task, we essentially started talking about an engineering design focused task, which is problem oriented, and a solution oriented task, which will be ambiguously defined, will be design engineering oriented. And if we start moving from this particular exercise to a well-defined task activity, it becomes sustainable. And that's what we call sustaining the innovation. So though you can get a disruptive innovation when we are doing well-defined task, well-defined domain, and the problem definition is also defined, and so on and so forth, you could disrupt, right? If it is not in the, if the problem definition is not defined, yet you can disrupt. But breakthrough innovations happen when you have ambiguity in the domain, but your problem becomes well defined. And when both becomes well defined, that's what the design thinking process will start enumerating. It becomes sustaining, right? So let's essentially talk about the frameworks behind design engineering. Human-centered design is one of the oldest framework with this regard. We essentially call it as HCD, and it's coming from the makers of IDEO, right? So Tim Brown, and you would have probably heard about the book called Change by Design, and typically this is where the design thinking frameworks were born, probably, right? And it starts with inspiration. There is a lot of inspiration that you take about research, and then you ideate and innovate, right? You implement. And this methodology, I'm going to talk less of this methodology, but talk something more about a different methodology, because this method is heavily used for service design, and it talks specifically from a user orientation. It does not talk about from a product's usage standpoint, right? So when we are redesigning, let's say, the education system in India, let's say, in a country, we can definitely go ahead and use HCD as a process, and that will give out a unique way to solve a problem. However, for a product domain, right, or a product understanding, or as product managers, as we are all here, we use a different strategy called the double diamond model. And this double diamond model is coming from the British design school. It is again an effective problem solving, and I use it quite so often that I probably forgot how many times would I even used it, right? It's innovation focused. And how is it innovation focused is what we are going to start talking about in terms of the design thinking approach. And how is it constructed is there are alternate divergence and convergence happening. And that's really why two diamonds come together to form a double diamond strategic model. So the journey is from, okay, I don't know what it could be. That's really what the problem is. And the journey has to end with, yes, now I know what it should be, right? So the process starts with discovering what are the problem that we are trying to solve, right? And then you need to define the problem. Oh, this is the problem that I need to focus on. And the third approach is you need to develop solutions around the problem or the problem that you have focused on. And you need to deliver on a particular set of ideas that you have, right? So it's the 4D model: discover, define, develop, and deliver. While doing this, when you are discovering, you're essentially researching, right? When you're defining, you are synthesizing all of the content that you have researched, and you have brought about a model in place where the synthesized output is shown to, let's say, stakeholders. And when you're developing ideas, so which is nothing but you're ideating on different models, what could be the end solution look like. And when you're delivering, it's nothing but implementation. And here the delivery need not be the actual product. It could be a prototype which is getting delivered, right? Or the MVP which is getting delivered, either which way. And when we talk about the Stanford's D School design thinking process, we know this 5-step process, which is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. It exactly superimposes on the double diamond in this fashion. The only difference between these two strategic models is there is quite some good amount of overlap for every step. with respect to the double diamond design thinking model. Now let's get into the detail of research. Any questions, anyone? Yes, please. So Neha has a question. Given that there are many problems to solve, how do we decide which problem to solve for the users? That's a good question. And we definitely need to prioritize our problems, right? So we definitely don't want to bring all problems to life in terms of a solution. We definitely wanted to prioritize which one is most important, that the problem itself needs to be solved first. There are ways by which we get that. I'm going to talk about that when I want to show you the case studies and things like that. Fine, Neha?
We have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Raghu has a question that when would you choose a HCD or double diamond?
Double diamond to me is useful for any product implementation. When I say any product implementation, we are all here creating products which are in the software plus any let's say interactive media in the form of wearables, and maybe something related to service design as well, right? When I was talking about service design, let's say we are trying to recreate or redesign the experience when you're entering a bank, a physical brick and mortar bank, right? So what should the path be when a customer of the bank gets into the bank, walks into the bank, and understands the process of cutting a check, right? So this whole thing could be understood by a service design element. So partly that can also be solved through double diamond model. However, HCD is more inclined towards only talking about humans, right? So why HCD in the first place? So long before, when I started way back in 2004, we never knew the word HCD or human-centered design. It was always user-centered design. So we were considering people who were our users to be the primary audience for our applications, and wanted to see how we can embrace them, understand them, empathize with them, and create products for them intuitively, right? So it was a user-centered design. So understanding the pain points of the user, alleviating pain from the user in terms of the software solution versus any solution for that matter, a service solution, was the primary motive. HCD came into existence when your users may not be your actual users. Your user ecosystem could be a huge array of values, right? It could be, I mean, we are talking about HCD being used to redefine the learning systems in, let's say, Kenya, right? So where your entire ecosystem will include a student, teacher, the whole ecosystem behind the educational institution, plus government policies coming in, a whole set of variables, right? So in those particular areas, HCD will be making more sense because you're keeping human at the center, his feelings and emotions surrounding him, and the ecosystem comes out of it. However, in the user-centered design principles, the user is kept at the center, or the customer is kept at the center. In double diamond design model, your product is kept in the center with the concept of, with the understanding of the user using or trying to use the product.
Tamanna, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, Tamanna.
Tamanna, are you there? Okay, let's move forward. We have
Fair enough.
a question from Vaishnavi. Does PM needs to involve in ideation?
I didn't get that. Pragya, can you come over, please?
Yeah. Does PM needs to involve into ideation? Ideation.
See, here we are essentially not, I mean, that's really what I wanted to outline initially. The differentiation that we talked about in terms of designer-like mindset versus engineer-like mindset is really not talking about the roles or responsibility of a designer versus an engineer or a product manager. It's basically a hat which can be worn by any person. Okay, we were talking about a QA, someone from QA who wants to become a product manager. Um, so there is a role change, right? A product manager who wants to become who wants to take more responsibility about the product designs, that's not a role change, but it's a responsibility change, right? However, in this particular ideation that we are talking about, in this particular model, the strategic model, any person can apply this model for his or her product, right? It's definitely not a designer who needs to take all these steps going forward. It's definitely not a product manager who needs to carry out all of these steps, right? It could be taken, I mean, any person can wear that particular hat of a designer thinking hat versus an engineering focused hat, right? So certain particular steps here, which I'm going to talk about in detail, which could be prototyping, right? That might need certain tools, which may be sophisticated for a product manager. But today's world, all of these tools have become so intuitive, easy to use, and DIY that any other person will be able to quickly create a prototype of his or her choice, and start becoming a designer. Does it answer, Vaishnavi? Okay, I hope so. Okay, can we move forward?
Okay, we have a few more questions. We'll take them at the end of the session.
Sure, no problem. So we talked about research being the first element, and what goes into the research, which I call it as input, right? So the big question, so we talked about, there was a question, hey, how many different problems can we even identify and try to solve? This question is basically giving the priority indicator of what are we trying to solve, who are we trying to solve, right? And the challenge. So all of this question and the challenge are basically both put together, which gives you a sense of, hey, this is the priority indicator. I know what out of 7 problems that we have, this is really what we need to solve first. And obviously the client brief or the design brief, which comes from the stakeholder, right? And how do we process it is we first rip apart the brief, right? So I'm going to talk about how we do it. And definitely we need to have a clear idea of what research methods are we trying to follow, right? Because there are so many user research methods and not everything is going to be applicable everywhere, right? It depends on your use case. It depends on your clients or your product's appetite for research, right? And you conduct primary or secondary research. So we talked about how empathize or ripping the brief happens, right? I mean, I'm going to take a reference from the product design world or the double diamond strategic world, where I call it as rip the brief or research, and also the design thinking model, which is the empathize. So both will be talked in conjunction, and a visual indication of the design thinking methodology is also up there for you to understand. So while we rip the brief, basically we do it with a post-it exercise when we are doing with a client or a stakeholder, where we totally understand what is that the program or the product is trying to provide value, right? And we also, I mean, apart from understanding why do we really need this in the first place, we also understand what is the program's success factors and what are the failure metrics for this particular program itself, and who are our users, and how are they going to use it, right? So it's not going to be diving deep, but it's going to be little like a pie, where we have a breadthwise view of all that is happening within the product or the program, and certain elements of spaces will be having deep understanding. And when we have this is actually, I mean, some of the pictures or rather all of the pictures are from my works. And here you could see one of our client who was actually going through the process of hand sanitization. This happened during the COVID times, and this machine will actually give an X-ray imagery, or rather an ultrasonic imagery of any germs which is in our hands, and it shows certain indicators. What's the percentage conformance, right? This kind of a machinery is useful, or an appliance is useful for industries like baking, confectionery, hospitality industries, etc. So we actually try to understand from the client's standpoint how things are getting used. And we also talked about user research, right? So while we do secondary research from our own stakeholders and clients, we also do primary research where we go out on the field to understand how things are happening in the real world, right? So here, this is basically an exercise that we did for British Parking Association, where we were trying to automate and operationalize the entire parking industry as such. So out in UK, we have something called ANPR, which is automated number plate recognition. So if there is a parking slot which is taken over by a vehicle which ideally should not, without a parking permit, then there is a charge which is levied, which we here call challan. Then in UK they call it as parking charge notice, PCN, and an enforcement happens and so on and so forth. And we also understood how parking space for physically in challenged parking base look and how they behave, right? So there are extra large spaces for these vehicles, and when people get into it, and how they disembark from the vehicle on those lines. So we go out and understand how it happens in practice. And let's say a person is paying for his parking permit, and how does he do it at an airport, or let's say in a railway station and things like that. We talked about the research part of it. So identifying the research methodology and which one applies for your real product in use, that's very important, right? Your appetite, the client's appetite for research is more important. That has to be understood first. While we are synthesizing all of it, right? So the input is, now we have understood the problem space. So an understanding of the problem space goes into it. Some unstructured research findings will also be something which we have found. Maybe there are quotes from end users saying, hey, you know what, this particular journey of mine is really the problem. And if we have a real quote from the user, those are unstructured research findings. And user session recordings. We just saw how a person was going through the parking systems and trying to pay for his parking permit, right? So we have user session recordings, obviously with his or her own permissions. And while we synthesize, we do cluster analysis. We talked about how we could make different problem statements come together in the form of solutions, right? So we first do cluster analysis, and which there is a technique to do that. That's also called affinity diagramming. So we bring together like problem indicators, so that we call that one as one cluster. So we solve for that particular problem. Next, find insights and patterns, which is really, really important, right? While we understand there are different clusters available for different problems, patterns may exhibit between clusters, which will give us a unique user flow or journey. And while we do that, there is opportunities that you might understand for future innovations, and we mark them out, right? So MVP versus post-MVP plan also comes out as part of this synthesis phase, because this is essentially the scoping phase. And how might we questions is basically what a designer-focused mindset asks. Here again, I'm not talking about a designer who's doing this. A product manager can essentially take this, use it, and exhibit this particular process. So he or she asks this question: how might we change this particular concept, or how might we change this particular journey so that it gets that particular output, right? So this question has to be answered with a different mindset, and that's really what we are talking about, a designer mindset. Let's get into the details of it. while we talked about a business model canvas, right, for defining or synthesizing your output. So you bring a business model canvas, which brings together what's your product, what are the different products that the customer has, and what's the real problem between them. Maybe there is fragmentation in experience, right? And why is that fragmentation happening? Because there are business models which are out there, which are using different products, but they are not connected together. There is haphazard usage, I'm sorry, haphazard usage of products across in a stipulated amount of time. And markets or user types also change, and personas also differ. So all of this has to be made together or brought together in the form of a canvas. And we talked about how our understanding of the whole ecosystem of the product comes into play. And this particular diagram that I'm showing here, I'm going to talk about this in a little while later. So let me just quickly brush through this. You could see customers who have a particular need. So you can say that this is a need coming in, and people who have problems, people who have solutions, right? Let's say Cisco, Aruba, and all of these are solution providers, and how the marriage between them happens, right? The need and the solution, how the marriage between them happens in the form of a user journey. So you could definitely synthesize a canvas like this and start promoting your ideas starting here. So, third, definitely we need user personas, and I'm sure you are aware of the word user persona. Let me quickly walk you through what it is. For different personas, for different companies, we do have at least 3 personas that we essentially take, because that gives a good variety or a mix. A persona is nothing but a fictitious character. It's definitely not, Thomas does not exist within Aruba, and Doris does not exist in Patchpot, right? But a representational figurative image is brought into life with actual data coming from users. So the tagline is basically what we really are counting on from the users. And we might wonder, what is this demographics going to be, right? Demographics are important for personas to understand what's our target audience and how are we catering to them with respect to product itself. We know baby boomers experience are quite different with respect to millennials. And when we talk about millennials, the Gen Y is completely with a different expectation with respect to Gen X, right? So while we understand there are differences in expectations from users coming from different age groups, we definitely need to know what's your product's end user age or demographic profiling is all about. And we have the proficiency meter. You might expect proficiency meter for different products or different experiences to be different in terms of their characters or variables, right? So multitasking, yes, we have it in 2 different places, but a person who is within himself getting his work alone and does not want to collaborate may be in a different space, like a network operations engineer, but an on-site supervisor, that might not make sense, because he or she has to go and talk to people, more collaborative, and that's what the nature of the work calls for. Roles, responsibilities, needs, and frustrations definitely are the key important parameters that goes into a persona, and that has to be well thought through. Not everything goes into these data facts. It has to be digested well enough, and only important data needs to be surfaced here. Okay, these are all some loops which we just talked about. Yeah, we need to understand the competitions as well to have a bit of an understanding of what's our competitive space. Next definition will be, now that we understood personas, we go ahead with empathy mapping. Empathy mapping is just about one particular person's or the persona's emotional aspect to the product, and or probably the so-called product. So we have saying, seeing, hearing, thinking, and feeling, right? So all of those our basic stimuli, right, in terms of our human sense, they get mapped here. And the thinking and feeling will be involved in tasks. Hearing will be more involved for influencers, just because when you get to hear something more and more, you get influenced by it. When you get to see something more and more, you have an environment which which also have an influence on you. A pain and gain will obviously need to be written on top of the other elements, which is nothing but your pain reliever and your gain generator. Next, we have the huge canvas called customer journey map. And yeah, so this is one of a customer journey map that we created for our end client. It may not communicate all of the data, but what generally people refer to is this customer journey map, which is created by Adaptive Path. And this is probably one of the most used or referred to customer journey map ever, right? This was created for Rail Europe. And here you could see that when you are trying to create an application for travel experience, you might wonder, or you might take into effect as a product manager thinking about, hey, I need to get my bookings done, maybe post a booking, right? What is it? And that's it. So this doesn't happen so, right? So before booking, there's a shopping that needs to happen. And even before that, there people have the tendency of doing a planning or a research about your travel experience. So this customer journey map is an end-to-end end user touch point to analyze what is the journey that the person is going through in terms of multiple end touch points, right? It does not need to be your products purview. Your products purview could be maybe the second to the third and the fourth step only, right? But the overall understanding of the customer's end user journey is what we need to be charted out here. And if you could see this, this is essentially coming from the data here is essentially coming from our understanding of empathy map, because we know, okay, while you're doing certain things, you make a phone call or you print certain tickets to start the process of booking pre-travel. And then if there is a change in plan, you call someone, paper tickets arrive on an email, all of it, right? So this is the doing part. However, we talked about how thinking, feeling, and seeing and doing, right? All of them will impact empathy map. So the data from the empathy map goes into the customer journey map. Sometime back during our synthesis phase, we talked about identifying opportunities, and this is where the opportunities at every step are capitalized. So opportunities at every step, right? They need to come out here in the form of post-its, and that's really what we were showing up here. So process in doing, thinking, feeling, overall experience, which are nothing but words which are present here, and opportunities. And while we do it as a quick post-it exercise, it has to be also created as a good visual like this, right? I mean, there are so many templates which are available online where you can use a template and start creating a customer journey map at ease. Obviously, the data that goes into it is very more important than the representation. Any questions? Let us pause for a minute or two before we proceed. Shall we proceed? Pragya, can you confirm, please?
Yeah, just a second. Yeah. Someone has asked which model is suitable for IT products.
Which model is
suitable for IT products?
When you say IT products, can the person elaborate more on it? I'm assuming it is a software product which we essentially use, right? It could be much like Swiggy from a consumer standpoint, or it could be a HRM solution from an enterprise view. Is that fine? An understanding? Okay. So that being said, we talked about, okay, IT products. I mean, I would say all products that we are talking about, be it in IT or legal domain or communication standpoint, or it could be medical related products. To me, all of them are products, right? So, and when we look at product as a problem solving methodology, To understand how to solve a problem, you need a methodology, and Double Diamond is a methodology towards problem solving. So definitely you can apply Double Diamond for the IT related problem that you're talking about. Any more questions, Pragya?
No, we can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So the third phase is ideation, and we talked about how business model canvas coming from the synthesis phase, it goes into the ideation phase as an input, right? Here is where we will start ideating the process of designing, or we will have to create the UX strategy, provide the design goals. Okay, what are we trying to solve through design, right? So that is, I mean, or rather I would say, how are we trying to solve a certain problem through design? We need to develop ideas and we need to collaborate on ideas, because I mean, long ago, where designers were working on silos and creating ideas, generating ideas and getting them ripped apart later. Today it's a world of collaboration, right? So when you develop ideas, you need to collaborate with more folks and start getting different mindset coming in. And you start evaluating the first idea. That's important, that you need to evaluate your first idea even before it goes to production. So while we start ideating, now comes user flows, right? So we know, okay, we have identified a particular user who is our persona, like a trader or an importer. While I'm here showing different examples from different, or rather different unrelated samples from different works of mine, you would probably understand where I'm coming to. Like a trader of an overseas shipment, right? Which is a parcel coming from, let's say, from Malaysia to India, right? So a ship carrying a good from Malaysia, and there is a trader or an importer in India who is actually taking the shipment of it, right? So when he does that, inside the customs department, there's a set of functions which happen. So we talked about how the business processes are entailed. This is nothing but a business process. And when the functionality is given to the user, right, and then a feature is provided. So creating payment is a feature, and the whole functionality of, let's say, declaration is a functionality. And the business process or the workflow that happens behind the scenes is goes as a process, right? So we need to have those definitions. So you could understand now that we have started with the idea of engineering design, right? So user flow understanding is engineering design. And now we have to come out to the next level, where ideating on analogies, right? So across users, many different types of users that we have identified as personas, certain things become analogous, right? So when that happens, it's the next level of abstraction. Okay, so now that we have started doing the engineering design principles and all that, the next phase is to elevate ourselves to the next stage, which is the design engineering phase. And in design engineering phase, we will have to start strategizing UX in terms of different models, right? We do have different models that we can use. I mean, it could be an before after model, where you can definitely show how the idea that you have come out with is going to really help, right? Here, if you're looking at the cargo which is coming in, and the set of cargo, which is nothing but work items, getting sprayed upon so many people without a proper workflow system in place, it just creates confusion and chaos, right? And people are going to be unhappy about it. However, when there is an efficient system that this particular set of variables or the work items get sprayed on, there's going to be getting things done happening, right, in terms of a proper assembly lining, and customers are going to be happy. So create a visual indicator of what's your thought process is all about when it comes to ideating. This is one way of saying before and after. The other way could be to use Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which essentially starts from a physiological needs. It goes up to transcendence needs, right? I'm not going to talk about that in detail, but here that kind of an approach is being used to show what are the different layers which are right there in a particular system. It could be an IT software that we are working on, a site, can have assets, and assets can have inventories, which could be wireless, wired, etc. And devices which are connected to clients. And when clients connect to devices, they will have parameters of connection. And when multiple clients have connections, they come into a network which will have some traffic controlled, and traffic could be up and down with some performance indication. And when there is an incident, there could be a problem. When there is a problem, there could be an incident which is raised. So totally hierarchical, right? How do we look at the problem from an inside out? From an inside out approach or an outside in approach, right? So incident first approach, looking at it from the top, or inventory first approach, looking at it from the bottom. So this model is the golden circles coming from Simon Sinek. So you can use that model, or let's say we have also used models like, okay, how can information be revealed, right? Information revealing mechanism happens in 4 different steps. And where are we applying what? What part of the experience is what we are trying to exhibit through our experience design in our application? Can our application still be descriptive, or should it go into the next levels of hierarchies? So there are so many different models through which you can strategize UX, and these are few of them. While we want to implement, there needs to be a design rationale that goes into the implementation, which says, hey, we have taken the design goal as so-and-so. There is a hypothesis that we have created. There is a vision that we have, and this is the design rationale. And our first idea is so-and-so, and there are these potential solutions. Now we will have to go and prototype, test them, and iterate and learn out of the understanding. And I'm just showing some examples of quick wireframings on paper and low fidelity wireframing on, let's say, tools like Balsamic, and high fidelity prototyping with the help of tools like Sketch. And here is where I guess it was Vaishnavi's question, right? So how can a product manager be adept at all of it, right? So Sketch may be a little difficult for a product manager to go ahead and learn and understand and create an experience on its own. But there are so many other tools, online tools, DIY, through which prototyping could be done faster. And when we talked about UI designing starts with understanding the mood board, a visual design language that needs to be created for the application. If you are creating an application for, let's say, Guatemala, you got to understand what Guatemalans are, right? So when you are doing an application for a typeset, right, we need to understand different typesets. Let's say it's a typography inspirational application, right? So you need to understand different typesets possible and then be inspired out of them and create a design language around it. And obviously, we always end with the last step, which we will have to validate as numbers. And it doesn't have to be always numbers. Sometimes it's also about subjective understanding or rating from our users in terms of something called user happiness index. And sometimes it's also about getting numbers. Saving 7 clicks a day, a transaction can free the user up to 2 hours a day. And then finally, we go ahead and create the UI mocks. Okay, so now we are just going to the end of this part of the discussion, where we started talking about research, synthesis, ideation, and implementation. So while research and synthesis is the first diamond, which has the divergence effect, followed by the focusing effect or convergence, here what are we trying to do is we are trying to find the right question to answer, right? There are so many questions, so many problems that we need to solve. We need to find the right problem to solve. That's really what we are trying to do in this first 2 steps. And what will be the outcome? We talked about the experience strategy, creating the experience strategy for the solution that we have, right? Yet we don't understand or know what is the solution. So here we are trying to do the right thing. And in the next phase, while we are ideating and implementing, we are trying to find the correct answer and the right way to solve the problem. So here the outcome is to execute experience design or doing the thing right. Does it ring a bell? Any questions here?
Yes, we have a question from Raghu.
Okay.
He asks, right way to solve the problem comes from personas, question mark.
Right way to solve the problem comes from personas. One definition is the persona. There are so many different ways by which you are trying to solve a problem, right? Or to find the problem to be solved. Persona is one definition to it. There are other definitions that we talked about. For example, identifying the analogy or the user flows across personas, which you iron out during the ideating phase. Is that fine?
Raghu, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. Yes, Raghu, please go ahead.
Yeah. So my question mostly was, right, so I have identified a problem. I know in the first place I've identified the problem. Now, while solutioning for it, what are the inputs I need to give for the solution? Like, should I just consider, let's say I have a persona, my persona are teachers, and I'm building some reports for them. They are not heavy users of graphs and stuff, right?
Okay.
They have seen tables, right? Now, when I'm doing this, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so when I'm doing this, so to arrive at a solution, what are the things I need to consider to arrive at a solution was my question.
Okay. So you mentioned that, right, Raghu? Like when you said your users are so and so, and they don't like fancy charts, or rather, I would put it as they don't fancy charts, and they don't want visuals, they don't want visualizations, but they are okay with tables, right? How did you arrive at that conclusion?
Oh, so
I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, got it. So there is already an existing view in the product. Now it's not being used. There has not been a click. Like out of 100 users, probably 5 have visited them. I'm trying to change that to achieve it to 70%. Now, when I went and asked the users, they said, this is too complicated. I don't understand anything. So there's no use to come here.
Got it.
So, and when you ask them, so how do you want to see this? Or what is the ideal way you want to see it? Max, I can understand probably a table, put my names and stuff like that. Right?
Okay.
Or you make the graph easier to understand. There are multiple inputs and stuff like that. So in this case.
Perfect. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So in this case, what all do I consider? Like I have multiple people referring to that particular piece. Should I just consider, okay, do I do the empathy map? Do I do the personas? How do I do this?
See, the framework that we are trying to talk through is basically a methodology, right? When I say methodology, not or a guiding light, it doesn't mean that we got to follow each and every step of what we discuss through, right? All through. Certain steps need not be followed for certain scenarios because it does not warrant to be. For example, in your case, if you formulate your questions of how might we, right? How might I make the charts which are super complicated, keep it pretty simple for these users. Then the question of who are we talking through? When you say these users, you need to define them, right? So which means you need to have the first element in place, which is nothing but talking about personas. And when we need some information about personas, we talked about their needs, their frustrations, their pain points, their responsibilities, so on and so forth, right? Do we really need all information to cater to this problem? Need not be. Are you with
Okay.
me on that, Raghu?
Yeah, got it, got it.
So you can
Helps.
take it lean. That's really what the world we are in, right? We are at the junction where we take things highly simplified to the use case possible, right? And we keep it lean and agile. So to the point that is needed, that's really what we take, and we don't need to follow all of the steps that the guiding light shows. While it's good that you take into account all of it, because this is more of a master class for us all to understand what are all the steps which are involved. So tomorrow when we interface a problem, we know how to solve it, and we also know what other means which are available out there, and not just stick to one.
Got it.
Okay,
Thanks. Helps. Yeah.
that's a good question. Thanks for that. Okay, any more questions, please? Okay, fair enough. Pragya, do we want to give folks a 5-minute break before the next part of the discussion, or shall we continue?
Yes. We can give a 5-minute break as well.
It's fine. Okay. So, folks,
Okay.
please.
Folks, we can resume at 3:12.
I didn't hear you, Pragya. Sorry about that. Please go ahead.
At 3:12, we'll resume the session.
Oh, great. Okay. Hi, Pragya.
Hi.
I'm just
So
going through the list
can
of
we
questions.
start?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I think all of the questions have been answered. Let's move on. Welcome back. So in the first 1 hour, we talked about principles, methods, and tools and techniques, right? So this time, we'll spend close to 30-40 minutes, and then we will open the floor for questions. So this 40 minutes, we wanted to talk about an actual project, right? So I wanted to show you that this is pretty much practical, and this is definitely not something which is just a session out there, and we don't know how it could be done. I really want you guys to go practice it and see the difference yourself, right? So you can take a look at what we have done for a particular exercise called Aruba NAS, Network as a Service. So we talked about how product managers can effectively look or take a look through the designer's lens, right? So this is kind of a problem that we always have as designers. So I was in Aruba's office 4 years back, and this was my previous engagement with a different company as a head of design. And half an hour through the discussion, Pragya, you can hear me clear, right? Can you confirm, please?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thanks. So half an hour through the discussions about my company's or my design team's strengths, what we offer, what are our services, what are our deliverables, how our deliverables look, and what key differentiators that we provide, uh, our value-based services, etc., etc., etc. So we have this question which was daunting, right? Which usually always daunts every designer. Hey, you know what? Yeah, I understand all that you were talking about. Maybe we need to think about it a little later. You know what? Now we have a problem and we wanted you to address that. The first problem is we have few screens, which I'm actually showing you right now. Those are created by our product managers based out of US. They have done their homework. Now I wanted you, coming from a design world, to beautify them, right? So this is kind of a problem I believe 90% of designers would have interfaced in life, which is something which they don't like to hear, but they keep hearing it over and over. And why is it really a problem? Because of the fact that this intersection had not happened before. Had the product managers seen the other world through the design lens, right, he would probably have not created what he has done, which I'm showing you right now, in the first place. So that is exactly what we try to prove here. So these are some screens. I'm just showing a couple of screens, but there are like 8 or 10, which were actually coming from a product manager sitting in US, and from the company Aruba, which is part of HP Enterprise. And the idea is basically to have a network as a service on the cloud. So what does network as a service mean, right? So we'll talk about it in detail, but I'm going to just give you a high level grasp of it. Network as a service is nothing but everything is on the cloud. So a network would also be on the cloud, pretty simple. But sitting here, let's say from Bangalore, Bellandur office, you as a network operations engineer, you could run a script to the cloud, to the network on the cloud, and make some changes to a network which is running in Tampa, or let's say Texas American Maritime University, right, in Texas. So that's really how IT products behave on the cloud. So when we want to do that, when a person sitting here is able to operate a network which is 8,000 miles away, what would he essentially need to know, right? He needs some charts, he needs some data. Well, I'm just seeing from a product management standpoint. He needs to show, he needs to see data, he needs to see charts, he needs to see visuals, right? Pretty simple, right? A product manager's view would always be that way. When I say always, if the product management manager had not seen through a designer's lens. So he or she has created a set of screens, which we are seeing up here. So there is an inventory, I hope things are clear. Is that fine? Should I expand the view and should I explode the view and show bigger of it? Is it fine? Can anyone confirm, please? Okay, interestingly, I'll just make it a little bigger. So here you will be able to see there is an inventory snapshot, different products, what is their current status, and what controllers or what products have problems, bugs, etc., etc. The overall network health and the overall uptime of all networks within this particular site. The network health, which involves performance parameters, system health over uh, a chart, a strap line, wired port utilization, how many ports have been utilized. This exactly shows their capacity utilization. Client health, which talks about how many clients are connecting or devices which are connecting and what's their signal strength. Security health, incidents which happened. We talked about it while we were showing that Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid, and some completed changes, upcoming changes. Oh, good. So many data points on one screen is absolutely great, right? And when we get into the details, probably I think it will be available by accessing the right clicks, the menus on the right, or sorry, on the left. You get to see CPU utilization over time, disk usage, path utilization, memory utilization, so many details, right? So we had this in the initial start, but we didn't start with this yet. So I tried to convince the stakeholders here in Aruba's office to make a mention that all I need is a couple of days with the stakeholders from a design thinking standpoint, right? So we conducted that workshop, and the first day went through this. We started understanding from the stakeholders the complete system and the ecosystem. We talked about it, defining the problem space and statement and problem statement. If any product experiences which are currently existing, we wanted to compare and compare and contrast. And the fourth step is to assimilate and strategize UX. All of it was done in less than a day or two. Yeah, it should be a day. It should be a couple of days. That's what from over time we are equipped ourselves to get this done very fast. And we had seen this a little before, understanding the NAS platform. So first we want to understand what is NAS service insights. What are the problems that people face today from a user standpoint, from a stakeholder standpoint, from a business standpoint? Why NAS, right? And what is its goals? How do we define success? And what are our failure metrics? A lost user experience is a priority issue for the company. So it's critically important. We need to identify them. How NAS wants to go to market, right? And what are the different user types that we think? This is fairly from a 30,000 feet level. So with this information, while we try to get this information, like a session of an hour or so, the next half an hour, we go ahead and map it out in the form of a scribble, which I will show you the next picture, which is over here. So we have customer needs coming from a wireless segment of 75% and wired segment, which is 25%. And here we are only talking about wireless customers and different types of customers, enterprise networks customers, in system integrators, public spaces like malls and restaurants and huge amphitheaters and stadiums. And not really sure what is this P category all about, some specific category of customers. And people who are majorly playing on these customer segments, right? They are here. Talking about the providers or the solution, I mean, here I'm talking about the solution providers. So SaaS connectivity providers, they offer multiple solutions in the form of incident management, monitoring, configuration, security, and restriction. However, NAS is talking about incident management and monitoring. So we are not concerned about other product lines that Aruba has. And within the NAS program, for this particular management of solution, today it's more of reactive world, right? And Aruba wants to go into the more proactive world of future. So the reactive world is, hey, there is a complaint coming in, there needs to be some reaction to it, and there will be a fix which will happen, right? Pretty much, pretty simple, traditional. However, if there is an alert which is automated, preempted, and predicted, there needs to be an action on it, and obviously there will be a fix which will be added upon. And this fix will have to be a template. So some learning has to happen on top of, okay, if this happens in future, what should be the fix which will happen going forward? So there will be an AI piece of it coming in, some learning coming in. And you could see that, okay, how are we offering the platform, right? So in the form of MVP and NAS managed services a little later. Now, with respect to the customer journey, so we could see that, okay, how the platform will be used by different users, or we talked about different personas on the different user journey. Well, it is not a complete user journey map, but this is a user journey which is abstracted in the form of a product ecosystem. So we mapped out here what are the different touch points on the particular user journey when it comes to onboarding, deployment, monitoring, and incident management, and the end user touch points. So this is very specific to network as an application, but you would wonder that, hey, this is particularly possible for any application that you essentially have. It's basically a diagram which marries the problem and the solution. And in the center, you should ideally map all the user journeys and its implications out here. Any questions on this before we proceed? Because this will be critical for our understanding going forward. Okay, I assume a no. We talked about how. Go ahead, Pragya. Was that you?
Yeah, there is a question like in every step research, ideation, and all feedback from customer have to be involved? Question mark.
Okay, so yes, I did see this question, and this was from Vaishnavi, I guess. And in fact, we kind of answered that from Raghunandan's question itself, right? Not every part of not every step in what we discussed last 1 hour need to be followed. It definitely needs to be lean and agile with respect to the method and the need of the application that you are working on. That part of the question was answered, Pragya. Okay.
Okay, so we can go ahead with it.
Thank you. So we also talked about what is the current user experience in terms of a business model canvas, and we wanted to map it with respect to what's going to be the expected product experience, expected user experience, right? That's something which we talked about, and you could essentially take this exercise, like go time travel one hour back and identify what part of the steps in the double diamond model we are essentially talking through here, right? We are in the empathize phase or the research phase. Okay. Now, understand the users even better in the form of their roles, responsibilities, tasks they perform, frustrations they go in through when they perform a particular task, and what are their dire needs, right? So we talked about how a persona can be constructed with all these 4 metrics: roles and responsibilities, needs, frustrations, and tasks. And all of these are actual data coming from a representative set of users. So it's not just like one user that you talk to and construct a persona out of it, right? At least 3 representative users you need to talk to and get a flavor of understanding, right? With that, you digest the data in the form of a persona. Now, the third step will be to strategize UX. We talked about now the definition has gone in. While all of this was very quick, it all happened in less than 3-4 days, right? So that's really why you could see that it was lean now. all steps were not followed, how might be questions were not asked, were not answered, or design philosophy is going to come out. We don't have to talk about it now, but you could see that not all steps have been followed, right? Directly, we went into the UX strategy or the experience strategy. So we were ideating on what models we essentially want, right? Before even getting into the idea. And we all know what problem are we trying to solve. The problem was we had um, a model in place. We wanted to see if that model suits the current user expectations. When I say the model, I'm talking about the product manager's view of the expected experience. We know information reveals itself in 4 different levels or 4 different shells. The first will be descriptive, which is just answers what is happening right now or what happened yesterday. Diagnostic will say, will it happen in future? Sorry, diagnostic is going to say, why did it happen? So we know it happened, and the reason for which it happened is the diagnostic nature. Prediction is, will it happen in future? And prescription will be, if it happens in future and we are predicting that it will happen, what should I do today so that I mitigate the risk of it happening, right? And we could see from the current experience that mostly all of it were descriptive. You could see that, hey, there is a snapshot coming up here, which is descriptive, which shows exactly how many are going up, how many are going down. There is an overall health, which is descriptive. Again, descriptive. Everything is descriptive on this page. There is a small prescriptive nature coming here, which says upcoming changes in the next 7 days, because we talked about any patch rollout, which is planned for next 7 days, right? So there is a little bit of prescription which is happening here, but that is not a real prescription. It just says what has been planned for the next 7 days. Why is it planned? Because there is a problem, because there is a prediction that, hey, things are going to go wrong. That is the real prescription, but that's not this particular prescription all about. And there is a small sense of prediction in the form of, hey, incidents which are proactively found by us. Yes, it's important. And Aruba, we talked about how Aruba wants to move into the proactive world of future, where it can identify alerts on its own through the networks because it has learned the systems over time. And there is a little bit of prediction. So an important segment of what you really user needs are going into small pieces of this information. However, the most part of the meat out there, the whole screen real estate has been completely descriptive. Fair enough. Is it a problem? Well, we need to understand if it's a real problem from a user's standpoint. We know from users that we have interviewed, understood the personas, there are 2 different types of users: customer NOC or customer network operations center, and Aruba NOC. Customer NOC has these set of needs, and while I think it's going to be the same, right? So in this scenario, what customers' needs are not what is right there in the current experience. The current experience is really good in terms of showing data into a summary model. There is a lot of information classification. All details are coming in one view, so it could be easily built upon. There are a good number of merits, but it's not having what the customers really need, which is the information really revealing mechanism stops only with the diagnosis part. For the most part, prediction and prescription is not even there. Full picture is not obtained one shot, and that too contextually. People need this. They need license, which is 75%, right? But actual data is not evident. Showing the list nearing EOL, end of life, will help the user to decide what to do next. So when we say that, hey, you know what, you have a router, and the license for that router, which is physical device, it is 75%. It means it's almost 25% that it will end on, right? So you need to have the list of devices which are nearing its EOL, because why do we need it? As a customer NOC, I need to advise my bill of material, my procurement, to say that, hey, all of these routers have to be procured licenses for, right? So now the system only has insights. They don't have actions. future is the system to have enough insights to take more conscious actions. That's really what we understood from our end users. And that's what we go ahead and do the next model, which is the new experience model. And we wanted to keep it very, very quick in the form of a quick, dirty scribble to show what our real thought process is, not to come out with any visuals out here, right? So here you could see that, hey, descriptions can be on here. Diagnostics about the description. Why is this happening? That should come up here. A predictive nature should show up here, which says, will it happen in future? And what will happen in future? That will be showing up here. And if it happens, what should I do now in the form of action buttons or call to action so that it mitigates, right? So all of this can be constructed within a single plane of the UI. And obviously, this has good number of merits in the form of modularity of views. Tomorrow, when this particular view has to go into a different viewport, it is plug and play. Actual business logic goes up here so that you build on top of the business logic. You don't build on top of your experiences is built on top of business logic or not, and not on anything else, on simple insights. Scalability is present and view customizability is also present. So we were able to exemplify these changes in the form of a UI a little later. But obviously there are some demerits to this approach. The first will be to resistance to change, because we all know the product manager has come out with his own views. And when someone with a different technique, right, we call about double diamond technique, etc., comes out with a different model, obviously there will be some resistance, which is human nature. Here there is separation of concerns. We talked about how the initial setup, everything was in the single pane of glass, and here it is not. We are keeping inventory separate and the rest of the others are in a different model. And obviously this is not usability tested. So if it goes for a usability testing with end users and representative users, we can still more refine this. That's something which we outline and tell the users, stakeholders. We talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this is exactly how it is coming out. For every human, the basic needs or the most basic need will be physiological needs, followed by safety needs, belongingness, esteem needs, and self-actualization, which is nothing but transcendence, right? Okay, I have committed to what am I going to be, right? Self-fulfillment. So applying these kind of methodologies to our model, we can also have a simple diagram which shows what is our structure, what is our hierarchy. And when we look at it from the top down, it becomes incident first approach, whereas bottoms up, it's going to be inventory first approach. And now it is our forking point. We need to understand if we go incident first approach, how the UI will look, right? Or inventory first approach. And I believe the client at that point in time took the bottoms up approach, which is inventory. And that's the trade-off that we made. So taking the inventory first approach, you could see all the devices, types of devices coming up here in the form of stats and also some diagnostics. Here you could see that, okay, all of this inventory in the controller model, how many of them are nearing end of life? How many of them have critical alerts and how many are in bugs? So you pick, these are the business justifications or business use cases behind NOC user to go and look at this portal, take conscious actions on the actual insightful data. An action is something which the user performs based on what he sees as data, which is, okay, they are nearing a UOL, but are they nearing UOL in the next 1 month versus, let's say, in the next 6 months? So he basically filters them out and takes an action accordingly. And we have the next stage, which is the UI production stage coming out after that. And I'm not going to go into the rest of the screens, but essentially what happened next was it came out to be, this exercise was like a 1-week exercise until the first set of screenshot that we talked about shown. And this came out to be a 1.5-year-old engagement from a design standpoint for Aruba. We talked about how this particular view is customizable right? We talked about it there, and so on and so forth. So many different models were created. In fact, the next year, sorry, the next month, Aruba had called us again for a design thinking workshop, similar kind, for their next product, which the project called Orchestration for Aruba, and that went through the same design thinking model. Okay, that's all I wanted to share. And fairly now I wanted to make all of us understand that this is pretty simple a methodology. With a set of tools and techniques that we have in place, it is quite simple and easy to use. It's DIY. You don't need a designer to be to do design thinking. A product manager can definitely do design thinking with the right mindset. That's all that I have for today, and we'll open the floor for questions. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. Do you want to coordinate on the questions?
1 second. No, I guess all the questions have been answered during the session only.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
So, folks,
So,
we have 20 minutes. If you want to engage on, let's say, a specific question from your end, meaning you have a current problem that you're trying to find a solution for, you wanted a little help to understand which step that we need to follow, etc., whatever, right? We can talk about it right now.
yes, we have a question from Raghu. Can you please elaborate on incident or inventory approach?
Perfect. Okay. I'll go to that particular slide. That's a good question, Raghu, because I did not detail it out though. So looking at it from, I mean, this particular diagram, the three concentric circles, why, how, what, that's called the golden circle. And the person called Simon Sinek, he publicized this particular model, right? So he's a good orator, a psychologist, and he has worked with many different companies consulting on product management and designing needs. So thinking about the why, how, what, right? So when a company started with the what, that's basically, okay, so what are we trying to solve, right? We are trying to solve a problem which is hearing to music. And how should we solve it? We should solve it by giving something which is mobile. And why should we solve it? Because people need to carry, right? So Sony Walkman started the model from the outside in approach, which is they were thinking about the what first. They knew that they had their Walkman, which was mobile and which was handheld. When I say mobile, it was handheld, and people were able to tuck it in neatly um, uh, onto their wall belt, and they were able to carry it at ease, right? So they were taking the approach from the outside in model. But iPhone started with, sorry, or rather, I would just go even dated back. iPod started with a Y model. So you could have heard how Steve Jobs explained or made the marketing pitch for the iPod, right? He said he brought his iPod right from the inner pocket of the jean, which we generally don't use. It's basically used for coins, I believe. The pocket that sits inside a pocket. And he took it out and he said, you know what, I can now carry 1 million songs. So why has to be the answer first? So he answered the question, why do we need 1 million songs? Because people need variety. And how comes next? It is a small device that needs to just stick in sleek inside our own self. And what is comes next? That's the technology. So he has built a technology based on a user need, right? But Sony Walkman, the other side, they had the technology which was meeting the why need of the customer. So that's the outside in versus inside out model. And coming to our model or the approach here, when we have the pyramid structure, which has the incident most on the top and the site or the overall inventory on the bottom, you could see that certain parts of them are colored while the others are not, which shows, hey, this could be taken forward for our screen designs as a navigation. However, certain elements need not be. For example, parameters, we could not have a screen for parameters. We could not have a screen for problems, right? A problem is understood by a knock user only by an incident, only through an incident. So we didn't have a screen for site. We didn't have a screen for assets. We had a drop down for assets or site, meaning which essentially it's not part of the navigation structure. Okay, so that's really why certain elements of this are colored, whereas others are not. Looking at this approach from the top, right, then you see it as an incident first approach where, okay, there is a problem right now. I need to address that problem. And what is the size of the problem? And what is the nature of the problem? Is it even addressable by me? Is it even composable by me? Is it even known to me? Should I be solving the problem? Or is it a problem assigned to me, right? So all of these parameters are needed for me to act on it versus look at it. However, looking at it from the inventory first approach will give you a structure which shows a navigation of the inventory itself. So here you will see, as I mentioned, we have taken the inventory first model for the UI. Looking at inventory first, when I say inventory, I'm talking about looking at the inventory being the first. I would see all of my devices and what problems are with the devices ending life, with the bugs, with critical alerts coming up next. And incidents go later in the charter. And these are essentially the navigations that we just talked about through the diagram, through the pyramid. Had I taken a different approach or the opposite one, taking the incidents first, I would have had just the opposite. Keep the incidents first, show the first screen to be the incidents. Does it answer, Raghu? Hello? Raghu, can I hear us?
Yes, Raghu has replied in the chat that
Okay.
thank you.
Perfect. Any more questions? Or if any one of you have any observations, you are free to talk about it. Okay, Pragya, I think we are done here. And yes, thanks everyone. And you have been a wonderful audience listening in for the last 2 hours. And I wish all of you to get the habit of design thinking as a problem solving methodology, and find it so easier to solve your problems in professional life so easily. Thank you, everyone.